Hi, I'm Charmaine. Welcome to Curiosity Over Fear, where we have the difficult conversations about overcoming fear with courage and curiosity. So, whether you're looking to change something with your career or just everyday life, I invite you to join me on this journey to be less fearful and more daring. For the last 3 episodes, we've explored how curiosity fuels personal growth and self development. We talked about how curiosity helps us push past fear, deepen our understanding, and build trust within ourselves, even in the face of uncertainty. But for February, I want to shift gears and explore how curiosity shapes our relationships, not just romantic ones, but friendships, family, work, and even the way we relate to ourselves. Have you ever lost a friendship because of an assumption? Maybe you filled in the blanks with your own fears or insecurities instead of asking one more question. Maybe you let distance and silence take over when all it really needed was curiosity. February is the month of love, but love isn't just about romance. What about friendships? What about the connections that have shaped us just as much as any romantic relationship? Actually, I don't think there's a holiday celebrating friendships, is there? If anyone knows, let me know. Imagine this: you and your best friend have been super close since college. You would tell each other everything, and there's never been anything you couldn't talk about. But lately, they've been distant. You would text your friend, and it would go unanswered for days. Plans to hang out keep getting canceled. And when you do see each other, something feels off. You start assuming things. Maybe they've found new friends, or maybe they're annoyed with you for something you did. You find yourself replaying conversations in your head, trying to pinpoint what went wrong. And without realizing it, you begin to pull away too, convinced that they don't want you around. So months go by and the friendship fades. Then one day, you hear through a mutual friend that they've been struggling. They were having some family issues and stress with their job, and they just didn't want to burden anyone. Your assumptions kept you from being the friend they needed, and now the silence between you feels too heavy to break. How often do we let assumptions build walls between us and the people we care about? We assume we know the story, but in reality, we're just filling in the gaps with our own fears. But what if, instead of assuming, we simply choose to be curious about what's really going on? So, what happens when we don't lead with curiosity? When we let our assumptions, judgments, or fears take over instead of just asking maybe just one more question? Often, our relationships don't fall apart because of one big event. They usually erode over time through patterns of miscommunication and emotional disconnection. We assume we know what the other person is thinking, we react instead of responding, and we let resentment build instead of seeking understanding. This is exactly what John Gottman, a world renowned psychologist whose work and research on relationship I deeply respect. John Gottman, he spent decades studying what makes some relationships thrive while others fall apart. And he discovered that the difference often comes down to how we communicate. John Gottman's simple yet profound observation is that couples who survive and thrive have a much higher ratio of positive interactions to negative ones. Specifically, the magic ratio of 5 to 1. So, 5 positive interactions for every negative one. This means that even in conflict, successful couples maintain a foundation of respect, appreciation, and kindness. They balance disagreements with humor, affection, or small gestures of love, while struggling couples often let negativity, criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling dominate their interactions. At its core, Gottman realized that it's not the absence of conflict that makes relationships last, but how couples handle it and how much positivity they invest in their connection. I actually came across his work years ago, back when I was married. At the time, I didn't fully appreciate just how accurate his findings were, but looking back, I see how much truth there is in what he teaches. And when negativity starts to outweigh connection, that's when relationships begin to crumble. And the biggest culprits are four toxic communication patterns that Gottman called the Four Horsemen. And while I recognize that he studied romantic relationships, these patterns show up everywhere: friendships, family, professional relationships, and even the relationship with ourselves. So let's break them down. The first horseman is criticism. I remember this argument I had with my ex husband. Ugh, I actually, I hate saying ex husband. Sometimes I can't believe I was even married, let alone at such a young age, but I digress. That's a topic for another time. Anyway, we were renovating our kitchen, which meant cooking at home was nearly impossible. Then his mom came to visit, and somehow she MacGyvered a way to cook an entire meal using just a rice cooker. And not even for rice, mind you. I don't even remember what she made, but it was a full meal. But since she made the whole meal, she felt like I wasn't providing quote unquote wifely duties for her son. So the whole time she gave me the cold shoulder. Mind you, when I got married, I was 20 years old. I had literally moved from my parents' home to my husband's home, well, our home, I guess, and was still figuring out how to be an adult, let alone a wife. When I brought up how his mom was treating me, instead of backing me up, my ex agreed with her and said I was being childish. And when I asked, then why did you marry me if you thought I was childish? He said, because I figured I could teach you new things. So let's break this down a bit. What makes this criticism? Criticism isn't about pointing out a problem, it's about making it personal, attacking someone's character instead of addressing the issues at hand. When my ex called me childish or agreed with his mom's judgment, he wasn't just acknowledging that I was struggling with the renovations, he was labeling me as immature. Instead of seeing the bigger picture that I was young, yes, learning and trying, he dismissed my feelings and framed me as incapable. Criticism often sounds like, you always, you never, or why are you like this? It's not about solving the problem, it's about blaming the person. A healthier response would have been, I know this has been hard for you with the renovations. I appreciate that you're trying to figure it out. This response acknowledges the struggle without attacking the person. And instead of labeling me, it recognizes my effort. It fosters connection rather than making me feel small or inadequate. You see, criticism breaks relationships down. Curiosity builds them up. Instead of making assumptions or judgments, what if we simply ask, what's really going on here? The second horseman is contempt. So, I grew up not eating pork, shrimp, or any type of shellfish. At first, it was because of religious reasons, but later, as I did my own research and learned more and educated myself, I realized they weren't really the healthiest options for me anyway. One time, my ex and I were at a sushi restaurant, and with a mutual friend, well, actually, more like his friend than mine, they ordered a sushi roll with shrimp, and I simply said, no, thank you. And instead of respecting my choice, my ex mocked me in front of his friend, making fun of me for choosing not to eat shrimp, like my decision was something to be laughed at. You know, I really didn't understand what contempt really meant or looked like, so I did have to look it up to make sure. Contempt is when someone communicates with sarcasm, mockery, ridicule, or an attitude of superiority. It's considered the most toxic of the Four Horsemen because it conveys disrespect and can make the other person feel small or belittled. And in this example of respecting my decision, my ex mocked me in front of his friend, turning it into a joke at my expense. It's also not just a disagreement, it's a power play, essentially, an attempt to diminish me or make me feel inferior for my choice. A healthier response would have been to simply respect my choice without commentary. Or, if he was curious, to ask something like, I know you didn't eat shrimp because of religious reasons, but what else makes you decide to continue not eating shrimp? The third horseman is defensiveness. Whenever I brought up something that bothered me, instead of having a conversation, my ex would shut it down with, I guess I'm just a shitbag. I can never do anything right. That kind of statement is actually a form of defensiveness, but it has a self deprecating twist. Instead of taking responsibility for his actions or engaging in the conversation, he used self criticism as a deflection, which can make it harder to have a productive dialogue. Because this response shifts the focus away from the issue at hand and onto his feelings of inadequacy, putting me in a position where I felt like I had to comfort him instead of addressing the real concern. It makes it about how he was feeling and leaving no space for resolution. A healthier response would be to stay open and curious. So instead of, I guess I'm just a shitbag, I can never do anything right, he could have tried, I can see why you feel that way. Can you help me understand what or how I could do things differently? This keeps the conversation moving toward connection rather than shutting it down with self blame. The fourth horseman is stonewalling. This was a constant in our relationship. If I had a problem or concern that I'd bring up, and if he wasn't getting defensive, he would just shut down completely. No response, no acknowledgement, no nothing. It felt like I was talking to a wall, and that hurt. Don't get me wrong, like I said, I wasn't perfect either. And in my immaturity, I sometimes tried to provoke a reaction because at least if he reacted, it meant he wasn't ignoring me. But that's the damage stonewalling does. It makes the other person feel invisible, unheard, and desperate for any kind of response. Emotional availability and communication would have been a healthier approach. Even something as simple as, I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now. Can we talk about this later? Or can I just get a breather and let me process? This can prevent stonewalling from taking over a relationship. And here's the thing, not only do these patterns show up in our relationship with others, but they show up in how we talk to ourselves too. Think about the way we speak to ourselves when we mess up. Do we approach ourselves with curiosity, asking, why did I react that way? Or what triggered me in that moment? Or do we go straight to criticism, telling ourselves, ugh, I always do this. I'm so bad at this or that. Or I'm just terrible. Sometimes the person we hold the most contempt is ourselves. We mock ourselves, call ourselves names. I'm so stupid. Or beat ourselves up over and over for past mistakes. Instead of being curious about why we did what we did in the first place, we just shame ourselves. Now, defensiveness. Ever found yourself justifying a bad habit or reaction before even fully processing it? Like, I only snapped because they were being annoying. I was only protecting myself. Just excuses you give yourself and not taking any accountability. Instead of getting curious about our patterns, we get defensive, even with ourselves. And then there's stonewalling, when we shut down our emotions instead of listening to them. How do we do this? We distract ourselves, avoid the issue, or numb out. Either Netflix, getting drunk, going to a party, doing drugs, anything where we don't have to feel anything. We don't pause to ask, what is this feeling trying to tell me? The way we talk to ourselves matters. And if we want to build better relationships with others, We first have to get curious about the one we have with ourselves. Instead of judgment, what if we met ourselves with curiosity? Instead of, I always ruin things. Try, what's making me react this way? What do I actually need? Because the way we relate to ourselves sets the tone for every other relationship in our lives. And these four behaviors, criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling, are called the Four Horsemen because, much like the Four Horsemen of the apocalypse, they signal destruction if left unchecked. They don't just appear overnight, they slowly erode the foundation of a relationship until there's nothing left but resentment and disconnection. But the good news is that we can change how we communicate. By practicing curiosity instead of jumping to conclusions, we can transform the way we connect with others. So, before we wrap up, I want to leave you with something to think about. We've talked a lot about how curiosity, or the lack of it, can shape our relationships, but now I want to turn it to you. Ask yourself, how often do I assume I know the full story without asking clarifying questions? How might my relationship shift if I chose curiosity over assumption? How have I ever let defensiveness, criticism, contempt, or stonewalling get in the way of a relationship? How can I practice more curiosity and openness in my communication? In what ways do I show up for others with curiosity? And in what ways do I shut down or make assumptions? How can I be more intentional about choosing curiosity in my relationships? Take some time to reflect on that. Maybe even journal about it if that's your thing. Because at the end of the day, curiosity is a choice, one that has the power to transform our relationships, deepen our understanding, and create more meaningful connections. So, whether it's a romantic relationship, a friendship, or even our relationship with ourselves, curiosity is the bridge to deeper, more meaningful connections. Remember, the choice is always ours, fear or curiosity. I hope you'll choose curiosity today and every day. Stay curious, stay courageous, and always ask yourself, what would be possible if you led with courage and curiosity? If you enjoyed this podcast, please make sure to leave me a review so that I can send you a free Curiosity Over Fear sticker. Then after writing the review, claim your free gift by taking a screenshot and sending it to me via direct message on Instagram at Curiosity Over Fear. Thank you for joining me this week on Curiosity Over Fear. If you haven't already, subscribe so you can get a reminder to tune in every other Thursday for new episodes. And remember, always ask yourself, what would be possible if you led with courage and curiosity?